Ethan Carter was never afraid of music. He had been playing the piano since childhood, weaving emotions into melodies in a way that made people feel something deep inside. But lately, something had changed. It started with a melody he couldn't remember writing. One night, his fingers drifted over the keys, moving on their own, pulling notes from a place he didn't understand. The music was haunting, elegant but unsettling. It lingered in the air even after the sound had faded. The problem? He had no memory of composing it. First, he brushed it off. Composers sometimes wrote subconsciously, right? Maybe he had heard something similar before, and his brain had just borrowed it. But then the melody started following him. He heard it in the hum of streetlights, in the faint crackle of a radio between stations, in the way people spoke, their words unconsciously aligning with the rhythm of his tune, and at night, it played on its own. He would wake up to the soft press of piano keys, his piano keys, as if unseen hands were finishing what he had started. Ethan wasn't one to believe in ghosts. But this was something else. One evening, desperate for answers, Ethan found himself at a dimly lit bar, nursing a drink and staring at nothing. That's when he met Victor Lancaster. An old man with sharp eyes and a knowing smile. Victor sat beside him, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "You look like a man haunted by something." Ethan exhaled. "You ever feel like music has a life of its own?" Victor chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Music is alive, Ethan. And some melodies don't want to be forgotten." Ethan tensed. "What do you mean?" Victor set his glass down carefully. "Some songs, they write themselves, and when they do, they want to be finished." Something cold crawled up Ethan's spine. "How do you know that?" Victor's smile faded. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, worn notebook. He slid it across the bar. "Because you're not the first." Ethan hesitated before flipping through the pages. What he saw made his breath hitch. It was his melody, note for note, written decades ago. Impossible. He looked up, his heart pounding. How? But Victor was gone. Ethan barely slept that night. He sat at his piano, staring at the sheet music in front of him. The melody wasn't just haunting, it was possessive. He tried to stop playing. He really did, but the more he resisted, the louder it became in his head. His fingers ached to finish it, his dreams became nightmares, visions of people playing the same melody, their eyes hollow, their hands bleeding from playing too long. And always, just before he woke up, he heard a whisper, "Finish it." Ethan ran. He packed a small bag and left the city, renting a cabin deep in the mountains. No piano. No music. Just silence. Or so he thought. On the third night, as he lay in bed, something creaked in the next room. A single note echoed through the cabin, then another and another. Ethan bolted upright. There was no piano. There couldn't be, but when he stepped into the living room, his blood turned to ice. A grand piano stood in the center of the room, waiting. Ethan drove back to the city, desperate for answers. He searched for Victor Lancaster. No trace. No records. As if he had never existed. But then, buried in an old newspaper archive, he found something else. A headline from 1952. Renowned composer Victor Lancaster and his son Caleb perished in a house fire. The young pianist had been working on a composition shortly before the blaze. Authorities found the charred remains of sheet music near the grand piano. The melody was described as hauntingly incomplete. Ethan's blood ran cold. Victor Lancaster had died 70 years ago. So who, or what, had been sitting across from him in that bar, and worse, was Caleb trying to finish the melody through him? Ethan returned to his apartment. There was only one way to end this. He sat at the piano. The sheet music, now complete, waited for him. He struck the first note, the air shifted, his hands moved on their own, faster, more violently. The melody poured out of him, filling the room with a suffocating presence. The walls cracked. Shadows twisted. The piano screamed, and then, he reached the final note, but instead of playing it, he slammed the piano lid shut. A horrific screech erupted. The world shattered, as if reality itself was unraveling. He fought against the force pulling him into the melody, screaming, "And oh, I won't finish it." The whispers became screams, then, suddenly, silence. Ethan woke up on the floor. The piano was gone, the sheet music burned to ash, and the melody, it was gone, too. For the first time in weeks, his mind was quiet. No whispers. No music. Just peace. He stepped outside, breathing in the crisp morning air. The nightmare was over. Or so he thought. As he walked down the street, past a small cafe, something made him stop. A young girl sat inside, playing a piano, and she was playing his melody, the exact, unfinished melody. Ethan's blood turned to ice. She looked up at him, and smiled. Ethan stood frozen outside the cafe, his breath catching in his throat. The girl at the piano, no older than 10, played with an eerie precision, her small fingers gliding over the keys as if guided by something unseen, the exact same melody, his melody. Her eyes met his through the glass. She smiled, tilting her head slightly, as if she recognized him. As if she had been waiting. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. This wasn't possible. He had destroyed the sheet music. The melody should have died with it, unless it had never been his to destroy. He pushed through the cafe doors, his footsteps hesitant, his heart pounding. The girl continued playing, undisturbed by the bell's chime. The cafe patrons sipped their coffee, oblivious to the haunting tune filling the air. Ethan took a slow step forward. "Where did you learn that song?" The girl didn't stop playing. Her fingers kept moving, smooth and deliberate. "I didn't learn it," she said, her voice light, almost playful. "It came to me." Ethan swallowed hard. "Who taught you?" She finally lifted her hands from the keys. The sudden silence was deafening. Her smile widened. "You did." Ethan's chest tightened. "That's not possible." She giggled, swinging her legs under the bench. "Music doesn't belong to anyone. It just finds people." His skin prickled. "Who are you?" The girl stood up, brushing imaginary dust from her dress. "I don't think you want to know." She turned to leave, but Ethan grabbed her wrist. The moment their skin touched, a wave of sound crashed over him. The melody roared in his mind, louder than ever before. Images flashed before his eyes, dozens of people, in different eras, all playing the same haunting tune. Their faces twisted in agony, their hands moving frantically, unable to stop. The music consuming them. A boy in the 1800s. A woman in the 1920s. A soldier during the war. A young pianist named Caleb Lancaster. A composer named Victor Lancaster, and now, him. Ethan staggered back, gasping, his vision clearing just in time to see the girl step through the cafe door. She turned back one last time. "You never finished it, Ethan." The door swung shut behind her, and then, the melody started playing again, but this time, it was coming from inside him. Ethan's fingers twitched. His breath hitched. The music wasn't gone. It had simply chosen a new way to be played, and this time, it wouldn't let him go.